The reflection in her eye wasn't a doctor. It was a gaunt silhouette that shouldn't exist at the foot of any hospital bed. This wasn't a medical diagnosis. It was something far more ancient and cruel. The air grew thick with the scent of antiseptic and something older, like damp earth and rust. Some hospitals keep a secret ledger, not of treatments given, but of fates already sealed, and they have their own messengers. Silent watchers who appear not to heal, but to claim. For the parents who've seen them, the cold touch of that knowledge is more terrifying than any prognosis. This is the story of what happens when medicine meets something it cannot explain. It wasn't a test result that echoed through the speakers, but a lullaby. The melody, soft and ancient, was meant for them alone, and once its final note faded, a metallic scent of ozone hung in the air. You had exactly 7 days to say your goodbyes. This is Mercy Memorial Children's Hospital. Its St. Jude's wing stands as a beacon of hope in a quiet Ohio town. Inside, vibrant murals adorn sterile corridors where dedicated staff move with purpose. Every surface gleams under fluorescent lights that never dim. On the surface, it was a sanctuary of hope, a place of healing. Sarah and Mike Henderson brought their 6-year-old daughter, Lily, here for a routine asthma treatment, expecting a simple in-and-out visit. But beneath that polished facade, the air carried the faint, sterile scent of ozone and antiseptic, a scent that would soon turn heavy with something far more primal. The routine procedure was meant to be straightforward, a brief stop in their day. Yet within those sterile walls, an unsettling stillness had begun to settle, like a held breath waiting to be released. For Lily and her parents, what started as a beacon of hope would soon fracture into something they could never have imagined, lurking just beyond the threshold of the ordinary. The warmth of that moment evaporated as Lily's condition took a sudden, terrifying turn. A rare complication emerged, defying every medical expectation. The sterile hospital air grew thick with the scent of antiseptic and something metallic. What should have been routine became a descent into medical mystery. The physicians, guided by the unnervingly placid Dr. Aris, were confounded. They transferred her to the long-term care ward on the 4th floor. It was a place of hushed, creeping dread. There, time itself seemed to thicken and congeal. On her 3rd night, while retrieving ice chips, Sarah traversed the unnaturally hushed corridor. She passed room 407, its door slightly ajar, revealing a dark interior where a silent orderly was stripping the bare mattress. It was then that veteran nurse Brenda, leaning against the station with steaming coffee, lowered her voice and shared the first chilling rumor. The air in the hallway grew thick, carrying the faint, sterile scent of antiseptic and something older, like dust and forgotten stories. In the dim break room, weary nurse Brenda leaned close, her voice barely a whisper. "You hear a music box tune on this floor?" she asked, her eyes holding a warning. "Not from a toy, from the ceiling." Her final words carried the weight of experience. "You ignore it, honey. You pray you never learn what it means." Days bled together in a sickening montage. Lily's strength waned, her breaths becoming shallow, ragged whispers. The machines answered with a chorus of frantic, insistent beeps. Sarah became a phantom in that corridor, tracing every fissure in the tile with her gaze. She tried to dismiss it as mere hospital folklore, a story crafted to explain the unbearable. But then she began to perceive patterns. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and decay, a silent dread coiling in her chest. The other nurses would freeze mid-task, their heads tilting like birds catching a distant call. Dr. Aris's kind smile would tighten into something brittle whenever a parent mentioned the evening music. Sarah, alone in the family lounge, frantically scrolled through her phone. The screens glowed her only light. Her search led her to a local town history forum, where whispers of the past began to surface. Then, she discovered the truth. The pneumatic system wasn't for messages at all. According to the janitor's fading account, Alistair Mercy was obsessed with comforting departing souls. He had the children's ward music box wired directly to a special panel at the main nurses' station. The air in the archive grew thick with the scent of aged paper and something metallic. A control panel with a single button for each room sat concealed beneath the desk. The hospital's persistent hum was now pierced by a faint, dissonant ringing in Sarah's ears. Her gaze snapped to the head nurse, whose fingers lingered above the hidden panel. Sarah watched as the nurse's eyes flicked from a patient chart to the button for room 412. Her finger didn't press the button for 412. But merely touched it. Sarah felt an icy chill. The selections weren't random. They were deliberate. A silent verdict had been passed. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and old dust, a palpable weight settling in the cramped space. Sarah's obsession became a metronome thrumming inside her own ribcage. She watched the children, a vigil steeped in the sterile scent of antiseptic and dread. Little Leo in 409 rallied, a flicker of hope that was quickly discharged. His departure left behind only a hollow quiet, a void where music should have been. Emily in 415 had taken a sudden, inexplicable turn for the worse. On her 7th night, Sarah was jolted awake by a sound seeping through the walls. The distinct, melancholic notes of Brahms' Lullaby drifted from the hallway speaker, played just slightly too slow on a phantom music box. Peering out, Sarah watched Emily's mother collapse in the corridor, her body folding as if her very skeleton had dissolved. Lily's condition plummeted, and she was moved to isolation. Sarah hadn't slept in 48 hours. The world had grown sharp and surreal. The air around Lily grew thick, heavy with the scent of antiseptic, and something faintly metallic. Every surface felt cold to the touch, and a distant, rhythmic beeping was the only sound that pierced the oppressive stillness. Sarah jolted awake from microsleeps to find shapes coalescing in the corner. Not mere shadows, but dense concentrations of darkness that seemed to lean forward, listening intently. Were these entities waiting for the song to begin? Or were they being summoned by its very existence? Meanwhile, Mike, driven by desperation, finally confronted Dr. Armitage in his cluttered office. The air between them grew thick with the scent of old paper and something faintly metallic, like ozone after a storm. Mike's voice fractured against the doorframe. "Just tell us, is there a protocol? A song?" His plea hung in the air, thick with the scent of ozone and old dust. From within Lily's room, a low, wet scratching answered, like fingers dragging across damp plaster. The silence that followed was a physical weight, pressing the damp cold of the floor up through their shoes. For the first time, Aris's clinical composure shattered. This wasn't guilt, it was something deeper, more primal. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and cold sweat. His professional veneer dissolved into raw, unmistakable fear. "Henderson, some of this hospital's systems are older than I am. They possess a life of their own. We don't control it. We merely observe the correlation." On the 7th night of Lily's crisis, Sarah found herself utterly alone. Mike had collapsed in the family room, leaving the ward to feel like a tomb. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and old rot, pressing in from the darkness. Every whisper of the ventilation system felt like a cold, sticky breath against her skin. 3 a.m., the hour when the veil between worlds grows thin. All ambient hospital noise ceased, swallowed by a profound, heavy silence. Then, from the hallway speaker, a soft, deliberate click. The air grew thick with ozone and the faint, metallic tang of old iron. A mechanical whir cut through the silence. Her head snapped up, every muscle in her body locking tight. The air grew heavy with the scent of aged wood and cold metal. Then the music box began to play, not Brahms' Lullaby, but something far older and infinitely more haunting. The Lullaby, All the Pretty Little Horses, drifted unmistakably from the speaker in room 408, Lily's room. Sarah's gaze locked onto Lily, who twisted in her sleep, her small body restless under the thin blanket. In the corner, the darkness seemed to thicken, congealing into something solid and watchful. The air grew damp and carried a faint, metallic scent, like old blood on cold stone. Their forms had solidified. They were small, child-sized silhouettes, standing in a row and facing the bed. A scent of damp earth and old rot seeped into the air. The room's temperature plummeted, a palpable cold that clung to the skin. Not a sound, not a whisper, just that silent, unwavering observation. It wasn't a warning for the living. It was a beacon, a silent summons for those who never departed to shepherd the new soul home. The air thickened with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like old copper. Sarah, driven by primal instinct, didn't scream. Her breath caught in her throat, muscles locking in place. She staggered into the hallway, the music now swelling, saccharine, yet merciless. A metallic scent hung in the air, cold and sharp like ozone after a storm. Her footsteps echoed alone as she reached the nurses' station. The counter stood vacant, monitors flickering their ghostly light across abandoned charts. Sarah's trembling hand hovered over the control panel, now exposed. Her eyes locked on room 408's button, which was mysteriously depressed and pulsing with a faint, sickly yellow light. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and something faintly metallic, like old copper. It was undeniable now. The system itself possessed a will, but did it have a fuse? With a guttural cry that was part song, part primal roar, Sarah brought her fist down on the entire panel. The glass spiderwebbed under the blow, and a sharp ozone tang filled the air. Electrical sparks erupted in a violent cascade, illuminating her face in stuttering flashes of stark white light. The lullaby from the speaker contorted, warping into a screeching cacophony, before ending with a final, dying ping. In Lily's room, the shadows of the children flickered wildly, twisting in confusion before dissolving like smoke into nothingness. The oppressive weight that had filled the room lifted, replaced by a sudden, unnatural stillness that carried the faint metallic scent of ozone. On the bed, Lily let out a soft sigh as her breathing deepened into the first true, natural sleep she'd experienced in days. 1 week later, Lily lies in a sun-drenched hospital room, her cheeks flushed with returning color as she chuckles at a cartoon playing on the television. Mike watches her, a profound and weary relief finally settling in his bones, the sterile scent of antiseptic now a welcome comfort. The oppressive dread that clung to the air for weeks has dissipated, leaving behind the mundane, reassuring sounds of a normal hospital floor. For the first time, the future feels not like a looming shadow, but a simple, bright path forward. Sarah stood in the hushed fourth-floor hallway, her discharge papers clutched tight. The air carried a faint, metallic scent of ozone, left over from whatever had happened. Nurse Brenda approached, her usual warmth replaced by a carefully blank expression. Her footsteps on the linoleum were the only sound in the unnatural quiet. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, offering the official explanation with no conviction. "They're saying it was a power surge," she stated, the words hanging in the still, cold air. "Fried the old intercom system. They're replacing it with a digital one next week." Sarah just looks at her. Brenda takes a long pause, her voice barely a breath. "Room 407. Admitted last night. A little boy with meningitis. Critical. His parents from out of state." The antiseptic air in the ward carried a faint, sickly sweet undertone. His breath hitched, a small, damp sound in the quiet. Somewhere down the hall, a door clicked shut, a sound like a final verdict. They remain unaware of the tales that haunt this place. Brenda subtly indicated down the corridor with a faint tilt of her head. Sarah followed her gaze, her breath hitching as the air grew heavy with the scent of old dust and something metallic. At the far end, the door to room 407 stood shut, its surface slick with a faint, cold dampness. But tucked into the frame, almost hidden, is a small, old-fashioned, wind-up music box. It's pristine. As Sarah watches, the lid begins to lift on its own, with agonizing slowness. The air in the room suddenly carries the metallic scent of old brass and the faint, sweet smell of decay. Then, the first perfectly clear note of a lullaby tinkles from inside the room, sharp and chilling. Sarah's expression shifted, the horror drained away, replaced by a devastating, frozen understanding. Her breath caught in her throat as the truth settled into her bones. The air in the room grew thick with the scent of ozone and cold realization. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. It was furious, and it had evolved. You can silence a speaker, you can tear out the wires, but the thing in the static had become something else entirely. But how do you silence a tradition? A ritual nourished by decades of grief? The compulsion to sing a child to sleep sometimes originates beyond the living. Certain lullabies, once their first note is hummed, demand to be heard through to their final, haunting breath. The final shot holds on Mercy Memorial's empty hallway, a tomb of silence. Then, from behind those closed doors, a faint sound begins to seep through the stillness. It's the discordant, tinkling melody of multiple music boxes, each playing a different, forgotten lullaby. The separate tunes twist and weave together, merging into a single, haunting anthem that seems to breathe for the dying. The lullaby swelled to a crescendo, then choked into silence. The sudden quiet felt thick, like a physical pressure in the air. A faint, coppery scent, like old pennies, drifted on the still, cold air. Then, a voice, barely more than a breath, whispered from the blackness, "Sleep tight."